to one of my favorite Canadians now, and it hurts me, but I understand why, that I'm talking to him, and he's in Boca Raton, Florida. Now, part of the reasons it hurts me is just because it's so bloody cold up here and it's warm down there. Let me introduce you to my friend David Frei, popularly known as Viva Frei. Great to see you. I can imagine someone who loved Montreal, like you're a very Montreal guy. And you can tell a Montreal guy because he loves the city. He loves the French and the English and the culture and the history and its place and fashion and restaurants. It must have hurt for you to come to the decision you had to leave.
Ezra, I love it. Some people think it's traitorous to leave your country. First of all, it's not permanent. I'm on a specific type of visa, which is a finite visa that I can renew, or I could decide to apply for permanent residence, green card, citizen status, or whatever. I love Canada. I love everything about Canada. Canadians, geography, the change of seasons. But had I had no kids, married with no kids, I would have stayed. It would have been, the inconvenience to me would have been bearable. But what we've just lived through since 2020 and going forward in Canada, but in Quebec in particular, I've got 3 kids, and it's not a normal way for kids to grow up. It's oppressive, it's abusive, it's psychologically destructive. If I had no kids, I would have stayed in Canada, no problem. But when you see what this type of lifestyle does to a kid, where they go into a building and get an evil eye for thinking that they're going to get in an elevator with another human being because children are vectors and to be feared at all costs. When they go to a second cup on Green Avenue and see people fighting with each other because they're standing too close to each other, face masks, lockdowns, no play dates, no sleepovers. It's not a way that children are supposed to be brought up. And I'll reassess in a few years. But in the interim, couple all of that with Federal Bill C-11, censoring the internet, which might cripple my ability to do what I do. Couple that with Bill C-16 out of the province of Quebec, which eliminates parental supremacy from the Youth Protection Act. I mean, you've got a government that locks you down, abuses your children, and then claims ownership over them. I said at some point, enough is enough. We'll reassess and see if this, I won't say sinking ship, but if this ship of Canada that's taking on water doesn't right itself within the next few years, we'll reassess in 3 years.
Yeah, you know what? Even as I was talking about it, I was thinking, well, should I have gone? Like, I hope I didn't sound critical. In fact, I was just trying to explain my own thinking. I felt that Rebel News, I mean, you talk about grand themes. You talk a lot about the law. You interview, I mean, even when you were in Canada, you interviewed Americans about American legal cases all the time. Montreal is so close to America geographically anyways. And I thought, well, why didn't I go? Because you're right. It was the kids who were the most punished, kids who, lost years of not just schooling, but you'll never, if you were in grade 12 and your grade 12 year was canceled, you'll never get that back. The camaraderie, the prom, maybe a school trip somewhere, you will never get those moments back. You can't redo your childhood. And the depression and it was a war against children. You're exactly right. I sent my kids and my missus down to Florida for a bit just to get away from Toronto during the darkest lockdown. They were lonely. They came back up, but you're right. And the crazy thing is everyone who left the old country, whether it was Italy or Russia or wherever your ancestors came from before they came to Canada, they would have said the same things you said. They would have said, it's for my children. They would, if they, my great-great-grandfather came over from Ukraine in 1903, and he surely would have said, I want my kids to have a better, freer life. It's crazy that probably hundreds of thousands of Canadians left Canada saying the same things that their grandparents said when they came here.
And Ezra, I'll just clarify, I didn't take offense to what you said.
Oh, I know you didn't. I just
and
realized I may have sounded prickly. I didn't mean to sound prickly.
No.
In fact, there's a bit of jealousy in me because you are in a freer place. You're in the freest place in North America.
People don't understand this. Like when we started making the decision in my head, it was when there was a vaccine passport, and luckily my kid was 12 and didn't need this to play soccer, to go to school plays. But my wife took my kid to school when this vaccine passport was in effect in Quebec, and my kid was being asked to show papers to play soccer outdoors after school. Luckily, she was 12 and didn't have to show the papers. My wife went to the school play. And this kid's wearing face masks doing plays. I mean, she said, this is delusional. this is abusive. And then we're like, okay, well, we have this, we have the luxury, the freedom, but also then the business opportunity came up with the work that I'm doing for Rumble, which is actually what brought me to Florida in the first place. Rumble, YouTube's competitor, which was, based in Canada, is now operating in the US. And lo and behold, I mean, they needed a lawyer. I'm a lawyer, and things worked out well.
I didn't know you were affiliated with them. I should disclose, I have a teeny tiny stake. I bought a couple of shares of Rumble. It's actually the only stock I own. Because I believed in I had the pleasure of meeting the guys. You're right. They were not too far down the street from us here in Toronto. And I think business opportunities would have made them leave anyways, because America is just the biggest market. But I tell you, there was nothing holding them in Canada. It was just so tough to live a normal life the way you described it. I think anyone who could get away did get away. Unfortunately, most people, that just wasn't an option. You mentioned you got this gig with Rumble. That would probably help get a guy into the States. Tell me more about that, because I love Rumble. We use it because I'm terrified of YouTube censorship.
First of all, Rumble is the future. I mean, it's the future of video hosting. They don't just, Chris Pavlovsky, the CEO, this is not an ad for Rumble. And I'll give you full disclosure. I don't own any shares in Rumble, because when they brought me on to review their terms of service community guidelines, to draft them as they would apply, I said, if I buy stock, it's going to, even if I buy it for myself because I believe in the company, it will look fishy, and I'm just not even entering that realm of perception. So I own no stock in them, but we're working on drafting the terms of service. I have an exclusive agreement with Rumble. They were based out of Canada, but it's becoming impossible to conceivably do business in Canada. And if Bill C-11 passes, it will be impossible for Rumble to operate in Canada. But the company is walking the walk and talking the talk. When, for example, France says, take down RT, the way the Canadian government is saying, take down RT off of the platforms in Canada, Rumble said, no, that's not how we do things. And they said, well, we're going to ban you in France. And they said, okay, so be it. I mean, you're punishing your own citizens. So the platform is as good as perfect can get in terms of non-politically motivated censorship, in terms of transparent rules, community guidelines, terms of service that I had a hand in drafting, crafting, as we will continue to evolve over time. And it's a company that I obviously believe in. And it was just, opportunity arose at the right time. We had gotten to a point where I said, I'm not going back to another 5 months of curfew in Quebec. The kids aren't. We're not having underground sleepovers like we're committing some crime where, like, the kids have to worry about being seen leaving their friends' houses because we might have been breaking the rules. It's inhumane, unscientific, unconstitutional abuse. Knowing what I know now, however, moving is incredibly difficult, incredibly costly, and I'm fortunate, but I do feel a bit like I've abandoned Canada. But I also think that having come down here allows me to be a lot more vocal about the madness going on in Canada, from Bill C-11 to Quebec stuff, and now to the euthanasia stuff in Canada, which people outside of Canada don't seem to be aware of, and people inside of Canada don't seem to be aware of, and it should shock the conscience of anybody with a conscience.
That's an excerpt from my show every night. It's called The Ezra Levant Show. That's me, Ezra Levant. You can see the whole thing behind our paywall. Well, there's a lot of goodies behind there. I do a show every weeknight. My friends Sheila Gunn Reid and David Menzies and Nat and Kat have their shows too. You get a ton of content for just $8 a month. There's so much in there you won't find anywhere else. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.